Hello and welcome to another episode of The Real Deal with Josh and Charles. Tis I, half of the equation, Josh.
And it's Charles. I don't have any math jokes ready.
Pardon?
I had no. You're making a math reference, and I didn't have anything good.
Well, fans of the show know that math is kind of my lifeblood. It's sort of my touchstone for life. I don't really understand a lot of the feelings and sort of more specific human experiences in life, and I kind of respond to things on a numbers basis.
Right, like Spock.
Ooh, much like Spock.
Yeah, you
And oh boy, that's
you watched that right this week?
last night. I watched about 1.75 Star Treks.
Wait, really? You went from double
Yeah,
dose?
we went first. Well, I mean, to preempt our special monolithic one movie review of our episode, after the film we saw, watching those movies was like being in fucking paradise. So, as much as my misgivings about J.J. Abrams actioning up the Star Trek movies, I actually quite enjoyed them. They were very fun. They
Yeah.
were fun movies.
No, I mean you can say a lot of things about Mr. Abrams, but one thing that you can certainly say is that he knows how to have fun.
Yes, he does, Charles. I think it's a very astute observation. And I did enjoy the antics of Zachary Quinto and Chris Pine as they showed us another side of Kirk and Spock.
Yeah. Actually, one of my friends, he really hates those movies because of the characterization of Spock. He said he ruined the character. He was such a complicated, angsty and in a realistic way apparently in the show. I'm not really sure how that happened alongside of William Shatner, but apparently he was awesome, and then J.J. Abrams just sort of took all the life out of him.
Well, okay, someone mourning the loss of emotional authenticity from the original Star Trek series has a very, very high tolerance for. I mean, that's a pretty insane statement. I mean, I agree. It's, competing with Leonard Nimoy, who really, delivered a nuanced, fascinating, and incredibly lovable character over the run of the original Star Trek and the accompanying movies. Quinto does a pretty good job given the thanklessness of that task. So, I don't know. I think bemoaning that would be a real waste of time.
Yeah,
Because
honestly,
it's fine. It's just fine.
It's
fine.
The only thing I really know less
It's fine.
thus than I know about Star Trek is really like comic books and Superman and Batman. So we have experts here today on the show. We're going to talk about all this shit. We have you didn't read comic books, did you, Josh?
I sort of on and off read comic books, but in the 90s, DC's tone got really grim and unpleasant. So my dad would buy, I think thinking it was very innocuous, he'd buy us Batman cartoons, and it would all be about serial killers and, nightmare torture and child abuse. And I don't think it was the kind of comics my dad thought it was.
Yeah, I briefly got into comic books when I was a kid. Just stuff I could get out of the library. I ended up actually I did read a bunch of like really early Superman, so I did get flashbacks a little bit, but not too much, and I mostly Dick Tracy. And then I picked it up when I was older and started reading graphic novels like Chris Ware and Charles Burns, but really nothing to do with superheroes. But yeah, I don't think a little ignorance is gonna stop us from talking about these movies today. Or actually just the one, because we both watched Batman versus Superman, Dawn of Justice. And we actually had two very different experiences. I watched it in the comfort of my own home on a lovely cam rip that I found online. And you actually went out to you braved it. You went out to the public space and saw it on a big old screen.
Well, I'm here in Cleveland, Ohio, and visiting my beloved partner, and I thought, what better way to sugar a pill like a 2.5 hour long Batman vs Superman film than seeing it with somebody I like very much. And I have to say, I think this is going to be a surprising and controversial episode, Charles.
I'm ready. I have no idea. As as our listeners know, we see these separately. We really have no idea what the other person thinks of it until we meet just online through voice. So who knows? I mean, last week I was surprised. So this will be another good one, I think.
Yeah.
Honestly, I was watching this by myself on my couch surrounded by dogs, and I really wanted to have someone to talk to throughout, because it's one of those movies that is really not very good, but I was just like in awe of it the entire time, and I just wanted to chat throughout the entire thing, just be going through it because it's just like a mind numbing. It's insane. The movie is fucking insane.
It's a real chatting movie, and me and Amanda talked throughout it. Let me go ahead and I want to say this. This is almost Zack Snyder's masterpiece, but it's a fucking mess.
It's pretty awful, but
I don't think it's awful. I really didn't hate it. I I really did not hate this movie, and I'm as shocked as you to hear that.
yeah,
And
wow,
in comparison to The Dark Knight Rises, a movie that I truly despise, this was almost a very good movie, just a total mess.
well,
And I think that with a lot of grooming and a lot of refocusing and um, just across the board, a good old dose of coherence in almost every level, this is almost an excellent movie. It's just kind of terrible as is. And I'm going to try to extract my own reasoning from that statement, but this was a roughly hewn diamond. Is my view on this movie.
okay, well, we'll get there. I think I'm gonna say this sentence just to hear you yell at me, but couldn't you say the exact same thing about The Dark Knight Rises? I mean, wasn't that just an incoherent mess of a movie that could have used a lot of love and reattention and focusing?
Well, I mean, if you remember, my biggest criticism about that movie came down to the fact that the screenwriter was the director and his brother. And I think most of what made The Dark Knight Rises so irritating was that it plays out like this one man's vision that has had very little editing, and as a result doesn't feel any pressure to explain itself at critical junctures, ignores some pretty incredible logical fallacies, and stumbles on to a length that is almost completely unjustifiable. And yeah, I think, a leaner, more focused version of that film could exist. It just is so far from that. But
Gotcha.
in this, there were a lot of moments. I think that Zack Snyder finds a way to talk about his own broken male emotions through superheroes in a way that is genuinely compelling and has these moments of like sublime subtlety and very delicate work that are really interesting, and then a lot of um, actual plot that is redundant, unnecessary, bizarre, completely out of left wing. It's all over the place, but I think the emotional heart is present in this movie, and I don't think the emotional heart was present in The Dark Knight Rises.
Yeah, actually, that's a great point. I think you're right on all fronts. Uh, the movie just suffers from being plot wise incredibly poorly told. I think it's a really good distinction between two writers without editors making a movie versus four. How many writers were there on this? Like 4 or 5 writers all trying to create a plot. I think it's true. There's different tones, and I think Zack Snyder's he sort of he hasn't really done anything. He doesn't need to create things himself. He does a really good job. He's like a great cover band. He like finds these stories that have already been done, and I think he's getting worse and worse in a way, but he does still have some heart in there. And I totally agree. The masculine stuff, he's been focusing in on that pretty much his entire career. And given the huge flaws with the storytelling, I still think he does get into it, which is good.
Well, if you remember from earlier in our friendship, Charles, and I don't think we've talked about this in the podcast, I saw Man of Steel. I think you saw Man of Steel, right?
I did.
That's a bad movie.
Yeah.
I'm not going to beat around the bush. It's not a good movie. It is inherently uncompelling, which is about as harsh a statement about anything you can render. It's just hard to give a shit about it. But towards the end of the film, there's a flashback that shows a young Superman playing with Kevin Costner, dad, and it's like this very brief, sepia-toned, gauzy shot of this like child in a cape, and for a moment, it's like the Rosetta Stone for the rest of this very incoherent movie. You sort of see what Zack Snyder's actually talking about. You sort of actually get a look at that emotional core of vulnerability and growth and innocence lost and childhood, and it's legitimately moving. It's just buried, in the last 10 minutes of this movie that otherwise has so little emotional and so little to hold on to. that it can't possibly redeem it. But that moment is real, and I have to give any director credit for being able to bring that out of a pretty thankless task like a Superman reboot. And similarly in this movie, you know, there are these moments that really ring true. They just happen to be like caked in a lot of weird shit that will not get hosed off no matter how hard to try, and that's a real bummer.
Yeah, it's that scene that you're talking about. Like that was when I watched the trailer for the first Superman movie. It was like essentially everyone was saying Superman meets Terrence Malick, and all the heart that we thought was going to be in it was completely, just it was so absent based on the remaining screen time that was just devoid of anything other than big guys and bad fight scenes and just terrible. Just the storytelling is so terrible in these movies. It's just the whole concept was Batman hates Superman until he doesn't hate Superman anymore, and you don't get a good idea of why he hates Superman, and then you get an equally bad reasoning behind why he suddenly is his best bud.
Well, the really punishing thing about a film like this is that it's the big showdown movie, and everything is supposed to lead to that one big showdown. However, in between these very clearly telegraphed like benchmarks of the film, it's best described as a lot of stuff happens.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to like I'm thinking over the jumbled fragments of the film in my mind, and it's very hard to piece them back together into a movie because there's a lot of these like things that happen, and because we're sort of given this crude chronological basis, it's supposed to do the work for itself and make sense that the only outcome of these events is this big showdown. But it really gets so caught up in its gears that, if I tried to explain the first third of the film to you, I don't think I'd be able to do much of anything. It's really a mess.
No, it's. I remember just feeling like the scenes were just glued together. It's like the writers didn't even. It's like they wrote a scene and then just fucking moved on and like, all right, we got to write this next scene, and they didn't even give a shit how they came together or what they meant on their own. I remember there was one moment where Jeremy Irons, who first of all, he looks younger than Batman in this movie. Isn't Alfred supposed to be like 100 years old?
He's supposed to be quite old. I actually pretty much love Jeremy Irons in this. He's one of the few unimpeachable delights in the movie.
But even he was like totally suffered from the terrible writing. I remember there was this line where he's talking about, I forget what he said exactly, but it was like making these really grand statements about when gods rule the earth. And it just like maybe it sounded good in some writer's head, but it didn't mean anything. And it just sounded absolutely, I think that was the thing. Everyone sounded absolutely ridiculous or absolutely terrible throughout the entire movie.
The number of completely inexplicable speeches that emerge over the film. I want to move backwards from the most poorly defined characters or the most abject failures, like Lex Luthor or Lois
Jesus.
Lane or Superman. Basically, the whole Superman wing of the film is just it's a lot of hot air. There's so little heart to it. It's hard to even dig into it. It just caves in so quickly. Henry Cavill plays an alien way too effectively. He truly seems devoid of any sort of humanity, and it's just hard to give a shit about him. It's very difficult. On the other hand, sad, chunky, drunk Batman, as played by Ben Affleck, with a genuine sense of mourning in his eyes, was weirdly compelling in a way that I was not prepared for. Like, I was, he's just Ben Affleck, which is still fucking amazing to me. He
Yeah.
really is, he's one of the greatest non-actors in acting, because he just kind of...
Yeah, I think we've talked about him before. It's true. He is Ben Affleck.
Right, he just, in a movie, there is no character. You're just looking at Ben Affleck, who has become, in and of himself, kind of this presence. Kind of like the anti-George Clooney, where George Clooney gets to coast because, it's George Clooney, but fuck it, who doesn't like George Clooney? But with Ben Affleck, it's like, you're like looking at Ben Affleck, and it's like, yep, that's Ben.
So good.
But
he's fucking huge, by the way. That dude's torso is... I don't know. Seeing him in a vest was just delightful. Every time I see him running around in a vest, it was one of the best. I love those scenes.
Well, the Batman half of the film gives us two of the least explicable and most mind melting montages ever. The movie at one point bursts into a dream sequence of like an apocalyptic Fallout style nightmare world where Superman is like the, you know, Mad Max style ruler of the desert plains in this like horrific apocalyptic future filled with crumbling cities and winged beasts. And so the movie just like bursts out full force into this elaborate fantasy. And I was not ready for that. It was really inexplicable and kind of amazing. Like, it was the movie I wish that Zack Snyder had made, the movie that it looked like he wanted to make, of Batman, hijacking kryptonite trucks in the dusty fields of what was once, Gotham. And, that was like pretty amazing. And then very quickly that sinks into a second dream sequence, which finally, it's so strange. That was pretty bizarre. And then when it bursts out into the Batman training montage with very little fanfare, like all of a sudden we're watching Ben Affleck like hammering tires and like dragging things around and doing pull-ups wrapped in chains, and it was just so strange. But like the Ben Affleck set piece, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. And actually, my friend, I didn't notice this myself. My friend really liked that montage because up until then, wasn't really doing very much. And then that was the moment he said that he found it very believable because Batman's all about planning ahead. And some crazy comic book person said that Batman will win every fight as long as he gets enough time ahead to plan ahead. So he said that montage was really good because it showed him dragging the tire. And then in the Superman fight scene, there's an exact scene where he's dragging Superman by a chain or
Yeah.
something. So it's like,
Yeah.
bravo, Snyder, for even letting us know that planning ahead part of Batman is in your movie, and that's why he won the fight.
Well, see, that's the thing about Snyder, where I feel like there's this minute details that he just slam dunks, like weird set pieces. Like all of the interiors are beautiful. A lot of the shots and cinematography is like legitimately, the kind of thing you could frame. Like it's a beautiful movie at times, but every broad stroke of the plot is just complete is so overblown. And for a 2.5 hour long movie, there are parts of it that move so quickly that I have no idea what a director's cut of this would look like. Like, I'm assuming it's like a 4 hour movie uncut because there are huge swaths of the plot that are just ripped through. And
Yeah,
like by the time we get to these big moments, you're just like it's dazzling.
yeah. Every once in a while, I would just yell at my dogs like, "This is insane!" Because it's true. There are moments where it's just like, plot, 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 plot. Let's go, and then it just like halts out and slows down. But it's true. The just the storytelling was so hard to follow at times. As someone who likes writing in a amateur sort of way, it's just I try to think about what these guys were going through, and it must be really insane to try to work on a project like this.
Yeah, and for our listeners, let me stress that Charles is a fucking amateur, okay?
Yeah.
So if he goes around talking a big game, you just, put him in his place if you see him. He's about, what, 5'10", white guy, glasses, a lot of tattoos, slim,
Yeah. Yeah.
cool
Keep
sneakers,
keep going. Okay, yeah.
maybe a sort of a jaunty vest or like a Uniqlo hoodie, I'm guessing.
Oh man, I'm wearing one right
Um,
now. Yeah.
what, horn rimmed ish glasses, not like aggressively, but like they've got a bit of attitude, you know?
Yeah, you guys, based on this, draw your sketches and submit them to our Facebook page, and the one that looks most like me, I'll keep.
Yeah, so we're going to add that to contests that will never receive entries, like when did Josh shit during the last episode, and listen to our show.
But
Um,
speaking of the story, I honestly think they wrote this story because they got so much flack for the first one where Superman killed an entire city. And they're like,
well,
well, I guess that could make a story about how people might be pissed off about that.
the movie, like, underneath all of the shit, and I want to get back to this. The basic premise I think is amazing, where you basically have these two weird, broken, orphaned men who are both trying to carry out a just vision of the future in about as polarizing a way as possible from each other. You have the ultra personal Batman approach of you are bad and you will be branded as bad and the system will work you through as it is to be worked. And there's the Superman, I'm going to sweep in from above. In broad gestures, I will attempt to rectify things and save you if I can, but possibly make you collateral damage if that's what happens. And the inevitability of them and their philosophies confronting each other is a very interesting idea. But like a lot of these big movies, they pound towards that confrontation so quickly that so much of the what could have been a very nuanced exploration of like these very contentious worldviews is basically just bulldozed over, which is a huge pity because I think it's an interesting premise.
Yeah, it is, and I think he did a much better job on Watchmen, even though that's not a perfect movie. I think that really explored a bunch of really wild ideas and looked at sort of love and a sort of perverse sexuality and control. I thought it did wonderful things with all of that, and it still told the Watchmen story pretty well. I think I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the money, maybe it's the studio involvement. I really think he's just been going downhill, and he's trying. You can sort of see less and less of his ideas in these last two Superman movies. They've really, maybe it's just, I don't know if it's the stories themselves are just not working for him. But yeah, I mean, we could talk about Sucker Punch a little bit too, because I think that's a super misunderstood movie, and I think it's pretty good.
I haven't seen Sucker Punch, so I can't even contribute
Oh,
jack shit.
damn.
I know.
Well, to go into it briefly, Snyder got a lot of backlash for making what he called a female empowerment movie that showed a lot of overt misogyny. And it's sort of similar to discussions I've had about I Spit on Your Grave and things like that. But I really do think that Sucker Punch was about liberation from objectification and oppression. And I mean, it's pretty much impossible to make a movie about removing systematic shackles without depicting those shackles. So the hard part about deconstructing a movie like this, and I think where a lot of the sort of confusion came about, was really just figuring out whether this is continuing that system or in opposition to this system. I think, again, also where some of the confusion was as strong as Baby Doll was, I really don't think she's the main character of this movie. And sort of seeing this as Sweet Pea's movie instead sort of helps clarify what this is really all about. I mean, I just think it's a really fascinating movie that looks at the depths of subjugation, and it certainly isn't a coincidence that there were so many different levels, like the real world and the fantastic world, and even that third level, where it really just talks about all the physical as well as how a person's mindset is affected by that. But yeah, I mean, I do think that Snyder, as sort of convoluted as this movie is, he does have some really interesting ideas about control, about sexuality, and about broken people. And I'm just feeling like that level that he did accomplish in 300, in Watchmen, in Sucker Punch. I just, like you're saying, it's sort of there. We do see these two large, strong men deal with emotional issues, but it's just so far gone that the storytelling is getting in the way even more, and it's not enough. I think there's so many better movies that try to tackle this. This is not gonna. I might actually want to watch it again. It was a really fun experience in a really weird sort of way, but it didn't really do anything. It didn't make me feel anything other than feel like I see what you're trying to do, Zach, this time, but it's really not coming through very well.
Yeah. To its credit, and sounds like a very strange compliment. This was a relentlessly joyless movie, which I kind of liked.
I mean, it certainly follows the Christopher Nolan. Christopher Nolan fucking changed the game. As much as you hate Dark Knight Rises, he pretty much created the dark, brooding superhero movie. And I'm actually it's nice that we're sort of finally getting out of that with Ant-Man that came out recently and Deadpool. We're still keeping with the realism that Nolan sort of put into motion, but we're getting out of the super dark aspects of it that have been pretty unrelenting in the last 10 years. And unfortunately, Batman versus Superman, it doesn't really escape that. This is Dark Knight Rises bad, honestly. I would say it's a little better, but the exact same problems throughout.
Well, I mean, they're both saddled with an immense amount of exposition and an increasing distance between anything resembling emotional truth and like existing in the service of telling this story that it seems strangely rigid, you know, which, you know, you bring on like a Zack Snyder or Christopher Nolan and you kind of expect things to be outside of that Hollywood paradigm, but like they really kind of, it seems like they beat this idea of checking off all the boxes into them. And you're right. There's no way of telling. Like, is it the studio? Is it this? Is it that? Are they just not? Are they gradually eroding as being top of the line directors? But this was a very strange movie, and the things that didn't work about it are so obvious that I'm strangely. I feel like I want to champion the parts of it that do work because they do peek through, and even though this film approached Lord of the Rings styles, exhausting multiple ending points towards the end, a few of them were actually quite good. I thought, and I think that I mean, okay, changes to the movie. One, Jesse Eisenberg theoretically may have played a good Lex Luthor, but the tone they picked for him is a disaster and is so grating and does not work. And you know, the dead-eyed performances of Cavill and Affleck kind of actually work in the service of their characters as like these like orphaned figures. But with Eisenberg, it doesn't really ring true. The franticness becomes a gimmick so quickly that's really a wasted opportunity to introduce like a third triangle to these broken men and their attempts to justify their actions in a very complex world. And
Yeah,
man,
I mean to just to briefly go back to what we were talking about John Goodman last week, and he played a semi-psychotic person incredibly well. And then just to watch this the week next and see Jesse Eisenberg, who I usually really like. I think he's a great actor. Not in this case. He did not play a sort of psychotic person well at all. He's fallen apart. Like to compare him to the Joker in Dark Knight, not even close. He just I don't know. He didn't get it. He didn't get what he was trying to do.
well, I mean, if Ledger seemed like completely consumed by the work, Eisenberg just shows the work, and the difference is so brutal, you know?
Yeah. Oh, it was like you could see everything he was trying to do in his acting style, and it didn't come across as realistic. It came across as Jesse Eisenberg doing this weird thing. It was just there's some moments that are brutal. Trying to sit through that with taking
Actually,
it
you made me
seriously.
think of a moment in the movie that's so ridiculous that I had to just jump right to it. But Lex Luthor engineers an elaborate scheme to get Batman and Superman to confront each other. The engine of this on Superman's side is that he's taken his mother hostage and will kill her if he does not behead the Bat. But the simple plot device that both of their mothers have the same name is a crucial plot point in this movie. And
It was great.
a movie of this size, like you really think there's gonna be like something more to it. But I cannot stress enough that two women sharing the name Martha makes up basically what 90% of the end of the movie comes out of that moment.
Yeah. And that's what I was talking about. Like, we don't understand why he hates Batman. They didn't. If it's explained in the comic books, they did not explain it here. There's that really shitty scene in the beginning where an old man gets blown up in a building.
Yeah.
I don't remember his fucking name, but like maybe that was what we were supposed to like. Oh, that guy I worked with got blown up because he was too stupid. Like, I'm just gonna pause. Like, why? If a alien spaceship is blowing the fuck out of the city you live in, why are you still at work and why are you waiting for your boss to call you and tell you to go home? It was an asinine. It was like, but no, but the writers put it in because we had to see the connection between Ben Affleck and this old dude, and then we get to see him die. It was so fucking this is like pat so shit, and I don't know what I was talking about anymore. Oh, you're right, because that's how he hates him, and then they become best friends because they have the same mom name.
Yeah.
It's just like these plot points that are apparently the pivotal points of these movies are just so poorly written and poorly executed. Oh, it was fucking hilarious the way he's like, "What did you say? Did you say my mom's? Oh, we have the same mom's name. All right, let's go get Lex." It's just dumb.
You know, the more we talk about this, I really love. I compared to The Dark Knight Rises, I like loved this movie because I found this compelling. Ultimately, like even through this, like the garbage, it was compelling.
I guess, but I mean, all your complaints about like oh, let's get every cop to go down into this underground city. It's like all the same shitty plot points were the exact same shit that happened in this movie.
I guess so, but man, I mean, I don't. If we start going back to The Dark Knight Rises, I mean, we can. Man, that's just gonna be the rest of our lives. It's me talking about how much I hate that movie. Um, Even though this is just as contrived, bloated, and ridiculous a movie in many ways, like the Christian Bale Batman is like a fucking saltine, and sad Ben Affleck Batman, which is like so much more ridiculous in a way. Maybe just like the meta intertextuality of like knowing Ben Affleck, but like I really bought his like sad sack like fucked up. I kind of loved it. Because like at this point, making a Batman movie, it's like it's become so transparent a role. Like there's no way to become Batman. You just become so and so trying to be Batman. And I really think Christian Bale was not distinct across three movies. He made a very small impression on me as an actor, as Batman. But like in this one movie, like sad sack, weird, lonely Ben Affleck Batman, like kind of moved me because he really looked dead-eyed, and I bought the dead-eyed thing.
I mean, there's no denying it. He is. It's just it's so funny to watch Ben Affleck. That really got me through a lot of the scenes. Ben Affleck is a really bad actor.
Oh yeah, he's not good at it.
He's just bad at acting, and it's funny to watch him try it. And that's we've sort of talked about it already, but just like watching this man attempt to do this thing. And the funny thing is, his brother's so much more talented than he is. I wonder if that's part of it, part of his little sad face routine.
Well, you kind of root for Ben Affleck playing a sad sack because you're like, oh, buddy, you're in way over your head. This must be horrifying. Because I guess all the reports about the movie you read about was like Ben Affleck not wanting to be Batman. And then there's like some quote people kept throwing in his face from like the 90s where he was like, oh God, I'll never be Batman. What a nightmare that would be. And it seems like you're kind of watching this guy live his nightmare, you know? So that's good watching, you know? I'll watch that.
It is. It's like a reality TV show.
Yeah. Um,
It's like, let's watch Ben Affleck get cast in a performance that he really doesn't care about. And let's do it. Let's watch it for fucking 151 minutes.
it was a long movie. Let's talk about some of the flights of fancy that you could tell Zack Snyder wanted to entertain really intensely. Did you hate the Superman as Jesus in Mexico sequence?
Yeah, I did.
Superman at one point leaves a dinner party or something to go rescue a single woman from a factory fire in Juarez,
Oh
Mexico,
my God.
on Day of the Dead. And there's this incredibly elaborate, like, you know, almost Goya style elaborate tableau of like Superman being reached out to by the skull faced Mexicans who are thrilled to have their like alien Jesus figure save this woman from this factory fire. And it's kind of one of these. It's such a weird Zack Snyder thing where you can tell that he really wanted it to be this big blockbuster moment, but is so strange and so poorly shoehorned into the rest of the movie that the kind of incredibly unnecessary underscoring of the Superman as Jesus montage sort of vibe. It's just it's a strange note, but I do admire that he kind of wanted to take things to that level of metaphysics and theology because he tries to really pump the movie full of that with Lex Luthor's big painting of angels and devils and is Batman from below us the Satan or is Superman from above us the Satan? And it's all belabored and ridiculous, but it is swinging a lot higher than Christopher Nolan ever did, and I admire that.
Yeah, it's true. It's like he talks. That's sort of like Jeremy Irons' speech was all part of that too. Zack Snyder. I think I'm just gonna go there and say he's not a very good filmmaker, and I think the reason why he was successful initially was that he was doing things like 300, which is a 30-page thing, which you can't really turn that into that very long, and Dawn of the Dead, which is fucking awesome. I love that version of Dawn of the Dead, and I think he did a great job with it just because it's such a short, like that one movie is a scene in these later ones that go on, and now he's trying to figure out how to create a movie in which he wants to include so much, and he's forced to cut out, and we get these little moments of things that he really loves, but they don't make any sense anymore because they're surrounded by so much shit.
I think what he's good at is intimacy, and he's terrible at world building.
Yeah, I think that's why he has to use things like Superman and 300 and all this stuff that and Watchmen, where he obsessively created the world set, but he didn't have anything to do with creating the world. I would love to see what he accomplishes in a movie that he actually wrote himself, and just sort of see what this dude actually wants to be telling. Because so far, he's been very good at covering other things, but it's true. He's like a Zelig or whatever. He's just like he just puts on whatever clothes he needs to make this thing.
Yeah.
And looking at his IMDb page, he's fucking roped into this shitty comic book land for the next 10 years. And I feel sort of bad for him. Even though he seems like he probably loves it, but still, it seems like, I don't know. I would fucking hate that, making billions of dollars.
Yeah, that would be a real nightmare, making a movie that has made to date over $800 million. What a fucking horror that would be.
Fuck. Ugh. That's why I'm glad I'm an amateur.
Let me say this. The action sequences were fucking great. The fight scenes were great. I thought
they were fine.
As a corollary to Nolan-style shaky cam, this was much improved. Very dynamic, very on point. We see a lot of long, elaborate shots that capture a pretty impressive scope of action. And there's a few confusingly dull fight scenes. Some of the Batman scenes are just like completely boring and weird. But the like climactic Wonder Woman, Doomsday, Superman, Batman fight, I thought was fucking great. That was enjoyable.
Yeah, it was fine. I mean, I'm honestly, I think I've said it before. I'll say it again. I really don't give a shit about like big fight scene CGI superhero. I don't really get into him that much. But it was fine. The Batman fight scenes I didn't think were very good. Maybe comic book people liked them. I don't know. Maybe it looked like a comic book, but especially going from the Raid and the Raid 2 to this, it was sort of chuckling at how sort of shitty it was done. And there were moments where you see a soldier just like obviously not fight, even though he's supposed to be fight. It was pretty amateur if you actually stopped and watched it closely.
I mean, if you're like the kind of movie viewing fucking wizard like me and Charles, that's stuff that's obvious. But
no,
most
but
of these dumb fucks
you
don't even.
just watch like a dude like, oh, I'm gonna hit you with my gun. Oh,
Okay.
I'm gonna punch. It's just like they were obviously just getting ready to get hit by Ben Affleck or whoever was in that big suit.
Can you imagine that being your job, like waiting to get hit by the guy from Good Will Hunting?
Yeah.
How was work today, honey? Ugh, the usual. I don't know. As a huge fan of Punisher Warzone, a wonderful, wonderful, complete afterthought Marvel film that features basically a heavy, stocky superhero sort of running around slowly and doing stuff slowly. I kind of liked Slow Batman. He does seem like this sort of like weird block. He's not this life ninja trained shadow warrior in this movie. He's sort of like a big meatball that kind of like, he moves very deliberately and very, that was humanizing in a way that I kind of worked for me. He just seems like like the idea of the Batman that we talked about earlier is this guy who just prepares endlessly. Like, you really get that in Ben Affleck's performance. And again, like, I don't know if being belabored comes off like a compliment, but like it does seem, I don't know. I kind of, he's like this big thick dude who sort of stalks around punching people,
Yeah, it did seem very set up, which is why it's like, maybe it worked better when it was in slow motion, because the similar fighting sequences were in Watchmen and 300, but there was that like super slow-mo that really wasn't implemented anymore. So maybe just watching it in regular speed is sort of goofy looking. It looked like it was intended to be slow motion, but then wasn't. Ended up, they didn't shoot it on the right film.
Let me ask you this: how fucking how straight up horny did you get with the chemistry between Lois Lane and Superman?
I had to pause. I couldn't contain myself.
Well, I mean, you were watching it alone. I was in public. I mean, I was trying to control myself. But the electricity between Amy Adams and Henry Cavill is almost pornographic. And I felt like they could have toned it down. Because it's a PG-13 movie, Charles. I want to bring my beautiful nephews to it. But I know there's that steamy tub scene where playful Superman gets in his work clothes, like a From fucking
Oh my
Hooligan.
god. I'm going to go out there and say that one of my biggest pet peeves in film is when people wearing clothes get into bathtubs.
Okay, and how many movies off the top of your head can you think of where that happens?
The Fountain.
Oh well, sure.
Uh, shit. I love The Fountain too, but
Three Men and a
it's not like,
Baby. I don't think that's
it
true, but
doesn't,
it seems like it would happen.
it's sort of like the nails on the chalkboard for most people where I was like, oh, I don't get in the bathtub. Oh, in the shoes too. He had his fucking nice shoes on. How big are their chests? How big are their chests, Josh?
Oh my god. Henry Cavill's tits were incredible in this film.
Yeah. Speaking of how dumb Henry Cavill is, did you see that video of him standing in New York and no one gave a shit?
No, I didn't, but that sounds delightful.
Oh, yeah. He's like standing right next to the poster for Batman versus Superman and no one recognizes him.
Well, wait,
It's
what would you
fucking
say? It's
awesome.
like, yeah, you're the guy from the thing. I mean, he's just not, and kind of like Ben Affleck, he's just sort of an anti-actor, which I kind of admire. That Zack Snyder seems to want like joyless, lifeless automatons like playing superheroes. Like that is, you know, I think there's this Joss Whedon, and if the Joss Whedon Marvel rebrand of like a lot of their movies was like, yeah, these are playful, quippy, friendly pals. In these movies there is this like joylessness about it that I it's like a sort of sanctimoniousness that it is not justified by how ridiculous and subpar the actual movies are. But I think that in my heart of hearts, I believe that Zack Snyder is trying to use these archetypes to tell a story about broken people who, put in extraordinary circumstances, find ways to communicate that seem impossible. I think that's a compelling idea, and I think he truly is invested in trying to tell that story. I just think it is impossible to do that in a movie with such elaborate expectations, so much ridiculous storytelling, and a total absence of any kind of grounding like Batman vs Superman.
Yeah, I mean, it might have a little bit more weight to it, but Watchmen is still, I mean, that's loved by its fans. And I know most people were pretty pissed off about it, but he succeeded so much more in that movie talking about very similar things. And he had very similar acting styles where these like large, slow men and women just sort of lumbered around. And I mean, the sex scenes in those movies were fucking awesome. And they really got to that level of wearing these suits and what does that mean and why do they do it, and it made so much more sense in that movie, and I think it did it very well. In this one it's just, yeah, it's so, it does everything wrong, and there might be a slight charm to that, especially when you're like with friends and able to chat through it, but if you're actually trying to watch a movie and get something out of it, this is not gonna work.
Yeah. Brief side note: my short list of my favorite joyless sex scenes in films includes Sean Penn in Colors and God, I just had this. Fuck
Fuck,
me.
Josh.
I know I really such shit on this one. Fuck
Yeah,
me.
that was like my
T-
bathtub thing.
Talk about a dead end, huh? Well,
Yeah, I mean, were you gonna say Irreversible? 'Cause that's pretty
oh,
joyless.
I was gonna uh, gear it more towards Eric Bana on Munich.
There you go. See, I knew you'd get there.
Yeah, those are the two I had in mind. Oh, hey, Eric Bana on Star Trek Two, or Star Trek One, right? Huh? How about that guy?
I don't know. Was he the bad guy?
He was Nero.
Yeah, yeah, that bad guy sort of sucked.
Yeah, pretty flavorless. Anyways,
Yeah.
um, Zack Snyder, Batman vs Superman. Uh, would you, on a basic level, would you tell someone to see this movie?
Uh,
Because I'm gonna go ahead and
no, I
say
don't.
go. I would say go with a friend. Watch it with a friend. There are things about it that will, at the very least, confuse you in a more compelling way than most bloated monstrosities.
Yeah, no, I mean, I wouldn't push it. Certainly wouldn't push it. The Is there so I've seen Deadpool recently, which is really good. I saw Hardcore Henry, which I thought was really fun. There's just so many better options when you want to either have just fun in an action movie or really get into the story of a comic book movie or superhero movie. This shit that's like these huge products are just not the way to get to anything important. There's so many better movies. I wouldn't recommend you see this.
These Batmans, you know.
Fucking see Super. Did you see Super?
I didn't see Super, no, and that
Dude,
stars Dwight from The Office, so you know
yeah.
he's fun, right?
That movie's fucking crazy. Really fun, really weird. There's a bunch of great superhero movies that should be seen before this. Uh, and
Are you a Darkman fan?
no, I haven't really. I saw it, I think, when I was a kid, but I haven't really seen it in a while. Is that
That's a
what's
real weird superhero movie.
that's what's his name? Is
That's
that
Raimi.
That's right? Yeah, Raimi's he's grating for me, and I sit through him sometimes, but I think that one was pretty good.
Yeah,
I'm
it
one of
was pretty good.
those those film viewers that really doesn't get into Evil Dead very well.
And what is your Evil Dead problem? What do you hate about it?
I don't hate it. It's like I don't really. If you're going for a gore, sure, it's fine. But there's so many better gore movies. It's like it walks the line.
Oh,
So yeah, you might be a little hard on it.
I think you're being a little hard on it. The first Evil Dead 1 is such a labor of love that is such a delightful production story, and I think truly has a few of the most iconic shots in film that I love
That's
come from
true.
Evil Dead.
It's fun. It's fine. It's just like I prefer Dead Alive. I mean, I'm definitely prefer all the early Argento and Fulci. So I just think Raimi's it's a little goofball series that, especially fucking
What?
Army of Darkness. I do not like that movie at all. Can't get into that.
Well, see, now you're being joyless because Army of Darkness is delightful, and we can get into that. That's a whole man. If we want to do an episode where we bitterly debate the virtues of Army of Darkness, I am there, baby.
All
I'm
right.
right there.
The
That's a
first
movie that
5 minutes
somewhat
are so good, and the last 5 minutes are so good, and then there's this hour and 20 minutes in the middle that I couldn't get into.
I like that movie entirely embraces the structural core of the film as simply a vehicle for quips, and I love it. Like they just 100% that's all it is. It is just stuff happening so Bruce Campbell can riff, and that's it. You just got to
Yeah,
go in being like, okay, this is a level of fan service that's like truly dedication on the filmmaker's part where they're like, this is what people want, and you know what, it's the fucking third movie in these very incoherently arranged, almost barely connected, so why not? Nothing to lose. So I think as a bit of fan service, it works wonderfully, and I would be a total jerk off to complain about it.
yeah, I would see that before I saw this again in a lot of ways, but it's Raimi's he's not quite my style, I guess. I think he sort of he tries to hit a few different areas that I really love, and then he just sort of wanders off a little too much for me.
Well, I think Spider-Man 2 was phenomenal. I really enjoyed the Doctor Octopus one. That
Yeah,
was
me
great.
too. The third one was like straight Raimi shit, and it was terrible. But he's so
Well, the
involved
third
in it.
one, the third Spider-Man is a real piece of dog shit, so spectacular by anyone's measure. Like that is a real fucking disaster.
Yeah.
And people, I dump on Nolan, and this movie is pretty stupid, Batman vs Superman. But Spider-Man 3 is one of the rare moments in like a pretty mainstream movie where it's just a complete disaster. Like, talk about making no fucking sense at any point. I don't. The plot of that movie, I don't remember any. It was just like a series of non sequiturs, and then it's kind of over.
But the thing is, like, here we're wondering, like, well, what went wrong with Nolan and Snyder because they've shown themselves to do good work. You can immediately see that this is fucking Raimi involved, and he ran the show, and this is exactly what he wanted to do. There's no mistaking, like, oh, a studio got involved. No, he just made a piece of shit because he's not very good
No,
at certain things.
that's a really good point because like I think the fun of Batman vs Superman is the sort of like you're doing the archaeology to figure out what Zack Snyder really wanted, because I think that there's hints at what he really wanted and the scope of his vision, like that weird Batman apocalypse dream. Like that's really interesting,
Yeah.
and I would love to see like a fucking hour of that. You know, but
Yeah.
with Spider-Man 3, you get straight to the id of Sam Raimi, which is full of terrible jokes. None of it makes sense. It's sloppy and full of shtick and doesn't work. Like, I saw Crime Wave when I was a kid, you know? And if you've never seen Crime Wave, that's the Coen brothers and Sam Raimi working together early in their careers. This is like early 80s.
Oof, I've never seen
Um,
it. I'll have to
it was
check
the
it out.
first movie that the studios, I believe it was written by the Coen brothers and directed by Sam Raimi. It was post Evil Dead 2. They threw a little cash at Raimi, and that is a spectacular disaster, a pretty incoherent noir comedy that is, we might want to unearth that at some point in the future
Yeah.
because it's a real snapshot of a bunch of incredibly prominent filmmakers at a very nascent time in their career. But see, with Snyder, he has the like the sort of like dead-eyed brokenness of the characters is his motif in all of his films. So it's a lot harder to understand him as a director
Yeah, there's that
because
glaze.
everything is so it's so distant, and like his like natural state is taking people who are like seem like they're dissociating, and running with them as leads. So it's there's a lot more detail work to get to the heart of what his vision is. And the problem with Raimi is that his vision is so overabundant that you want to just chill the fuck out and stop it.
Absolutely. Quick and the Dead is another fucking piece of shit mess that could have been good, but yeah, he's just a joke. He's a
Didn't we
joke.
watch that for our old radio show?
I don't think so, but maybe.
I think we watched the Quick and the Dead for Outpost 31 many years
Wow,
ago.
we could have. I mean, I've certainly seen it. I've seen it more than once for some
I've
reason.
I've seen it too. Anyways, yeah. Let's move to trailers really quickly as we move to the final quadrant of the podcast. Um, I've been seeing a lot of trailers for two movies that are, the next big blockbusters for DC and Marvel, respectively. We have Captain America: Civil War and DC's Suicide Squad.
Oh yeah.
Two movies that have been pitched so aggressively differently in tone that they demand to be compared. Charles, do you have any thoughts about those trailers?
I Suicide Squad has its trailers are really bad, but I think it could potentially have some good. And Captain America is the fucking worst. So no, I have. They're just he's those movies suck. Honestly, I hate all those fucking movies. The Avengers, whatever. I don't even know it anymore. Iron Man 2 and 3, they're so bad. I do not
What
understand
was?
why they're being made
Hold on, hold
and
on, hold on.
swallowed.
I think the Captain America movies, I actually think are quite good, and they play against the glibness of Iron Man and the Avengers in a way that I actually enjoy. It's not as dead-eyed as DC, but it is more, it's grimmer certainly than the like quip a minute vibe of the Avengers, which is designed to be a pretty, that's a cotton candy experience from the start, and they know it. So I find it hard to criticize the Avengers because it's designed to be a self-aware popcorn movie, and it delivers. It's like my whole Transformers thesis. Did big robots fight in it? Yes. It's fine. Go home. That's what that serves the purpose of. And I really think that Captain America 2 actually was a pretty interesting revival of like a 70s style paranoid thriller, and I enjoyed it. And I think the Civil War trailer looks awesome, and I'm actually very excited about it.
I don't think either trailer looked very good, but I agree that this third one looks like it's probably going to be the best of the bunch. It's
I just think the Suicide Squad trailer looks fucking awful.
you do?
Oh, it looks like one. It's not funny.
No, and it's trying so hard to be.
The Margaret Robbie casting as Harley Quinn seems like a disaster.
Yeah, I agree
Those
with that.
lines do not land. Will Smith looks like he got himself in something he shouldn't have and knows it. Um, the whole tone of like they're the bad guys just rings hollow and silly, and it doesn't like it's not compelling in any way. And the font they chose looks like fucking Hot Topic puked all over the goddamn movie. Not a good look.
No, it's I'll still see it. I'm sort of interested in it, but the trailer was a complete disaster, and I'm not sure. I think most people already know enough about it to just sort of see it and ignore it. But it's yeah, I've seen it 3 times I think, and it's unbearable. The ending little where she steals the purse out of the window. Mm.
We're bad
Oh.
guys. It's what we do.
Ew. Mm.
Yeah. It's cloying and saccharine when it's trying to be grim and edgy, which is fucking dumb. And I think back to back, the Civil War one, they introduced the sort of the intellectual and moral stakes of the movie of, how does one be super in a world of humans? And makes it seem like the kind of argument you want to see between two familiar characters. So, I don't know. The selling point is pretty well telegraphed in that, and they manage, I think, to make it seem driven and interesting. So,
Yeah, they
I
say
don't
the
know.
word punch
I
at least 2 times, which I noticed.
What else did you notice?
I want to punch you in your little face or something, and I like that line. And yeah,
Because Iron Man's like, I want to punch you in those perfect little teeth,
yeah.
Captain.
Sometimes, every once in a while, your just little teeth make me want to punch him, even though,
I want to punch those little teeth, you little
yeah,
perfect man.
oh, yeah, I like that. And oh, you used to be friends with me. That was a good little moment. I'm sort of worried though that all the good moments have been ruined. It's gonna be nothing left
By what?
by the trailer. Like they stole all the good parts. Like, oh look, there's my friend, and now he's beating the shit out of me. And oh look, my friend wants to punch my face. Like these are all sound like really emotional moments, and they've been sort of just sullied by being included in a 2.5 minute trailer. So how am I going to feel anything when I see the full movie? Am I going to
Well,
forget?
I mean, how much do you feel on a general, like, day-to-day basis, Charles?
It's hard to really evaluate that.
Yeah,
I mean, there has to be some
yeah,
sort
it is.
of control group and point at which I really don't know. But I was expecting more from the movie and not more from the trailer.
Well, Charles, we're getting into the wrap up here, and I I think that Batman vs Superman is the kind of failure that deserves inspection because there are weird details that really work and a lot of garbage that is just begging to get shoved out of the way to focus on the things that are compelling. And it's not, I don't think it's the disaster that a lot of people wanted it to be or that a lot of critics lambasted it for. It's not a very good movie. It's just not terrible though. There's enough going on in it that I would see that a second time.
I think I was watching it. I was like, this would be a fun movie to make a little commentary track for. We're still working on our jobs commentary, but I think this might be our second one if we ever get doing that. Because I think it is a fun movie to look at and inspect because there's so much in it, just lengthwise, first of all, but there is stuff there. It's just so buried. I think just really chatting about it while it's going on it would be fun. I would definitely see it again with you.
And that's what makes our friendship thrive.
Yeah, but in the long run, it's like in the world where we have stuff like Kick Ass and Kingsman, those two good Matthew Vaughn pictures, and other fun, like really exuberant action movies and superhero movies, this just is a blah fest and not, it's like, it's just such a struggle to really recommend it when you have so many better choices. I would, as an experiment, maybe go see it, but don't expect too much.
Well, I mean, I really went into it with such low expectations. And for the kind of bloated monstrosity it is, you're right. I think it's hard to be like, throw your money at this thing. But, you know, if there was some way to watch it for free, of which I am blissfully unaware, check it out.
Check it
There's
out.
things about it that work. There's a
Yeah,
lot about it that doesn't.
yeah. I mean, it's better than Spectre. It's better than a lot of things. Just worse than so much more. But Ben Affleck's fucking killer, and he looks great in a vest. And there's scenes that are just magnificent and mysterious. And the sequence where he plants the bug in the computer room was fucking awesome. Just like I know we're running out
Yeah,
of
that
time,
was
but just
great.
like, oh, you're where you're not supposed to be planting a thing on a computer thing. Maybe you should go. He's like, oh, I'm just trying to find the bathroom. And then she leaves, and he
I'm a
stays.
dumb
It's like,
fuck.
what? Why didn't you make sure he left the computer server room? Just like all these crazy shit. It's just an insane fucking movie, and it could be a lot of fun in certain ways.
And with that being said, I want to wish the most Batman versus Superman of weeks upon all of our listeners. And, hey, are you Team Batman or Team Superman? Chime in.
Yeah, we'd love to know that too.
Yeah.
Another contest. We could
Ooh.
two contests this week. And
Which dead-eyed loser did you like more?
are you talking about us or them?
Oh God, who can fucking tell anymore, Charles? I don't know.
Hey, are we gonna fucking watch Bone Tomahawk? I watched it.
I'm gonna,
I'm
yeah, I'm
ready.
gonna
I've been
watch it
ready to
too.
talk about
I
it.
I was on a packed Greyhound bus, and I thought it would be more empty. And I realized very quickly that it would not be a good idea to watch Bone Tomahawk on a packed bus. So I made an executive decision to not do that, and instead watch most of season 2 of the Larry Sanders Show.
Oh, brilliant. Good choice. But yeah, we might
I
do that.
agree.
We'll see what happens. But yeah, you give us the old 1-2 outro.
As ever, I've been Josh,
And this is Charles.
and this was The Real Deal. Tune in next week for more Jibber Jabber.